Let's begin with the big story that we're tracking on Beyond the Headline. Tonight, the Delhi Ordinance issue returned to the headlines today as the Supreme Court tried to play peacemaker between the centre and the Delhi government. In its hearing today on the Delhi government's plea challenging the centre's ordinance, the Supreme Court floated the idea of referring the matter to a constitution bench and asked the two sides to stop bickering and rise above politics. Now, the bench comprising Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and Justice P.S. Narasimha will now hear the matter on Thursday. Now, remember, the tussle between the centre and Delhi's Aam Aadmi Party government began on the 11th of May when the Supreme Court had given a decision in favour of the elected AAP government and handed it the control of services in the national capital, but excluding the control of police, public order and land. The centre, meanwhile, says the present legislation is under Article 239AA of the Indian Constitution. In fact, today, the centre and the LG, in their affidavit at the Supreme Court, claimed false and baseless submissions by the Delhi government on political grounds. The centre, in fact, has also accused the Aam Aadmi Party of threatening officers. Both sides have asked the Supreme Court to wait till the ordinance is introduced in the Parliament during the monsoon session. Now, the number game is also playing out between both the sides amid, of course, the opposition trying to put up a united front in Bengaluru. But in all of this squabbling, who is suffering? As usual, the common citizen. How? Well, in another case that the Supreme Court took up today, it heard the plea that challenges the LG's decision of appointing the Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission chairperson without Delhi government's concurrence. This matter too will be heard on Thursday. The Supreme Court asked the Delhi Chief Minister and the LG to discuss the names of the former judges who could head the national capital's power regulator. So no chairperson for the Delhi's electricity regulator and several civil servants awaiting their transfer. So on Beyond the Headline today, we get to you what are the legalities of this ordinance, what the upcoming monsoon session might witness, and the road ahead. To discuss more on this, I am being joined by a panel of guests. Let me first introduce them. I'm joined by Mr. Vineet Goenka, who is the BJP spokesperson. I'm also joined by Ashwani K Dubey, Advocate Supreme Court. Huda Zariwala also joins us. She's a political analyst, and Mr. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court. Welcome to all of you on Beyond the Headlines. First, let me come across to you, Ms. Huda. You know, this tussle has been going on for months now, and of course, it's back in the news today when the Supreme Court said that it is inclined to refer it to a constitution bench. First of all, help us understand what really transpired in the court today.
Well, at this point, when we refer to the Article 239AA, this is a people's elected government, with its own legislative assembly, and it has its own council of ministers that has the responsibility to deliver the executive postings as they please, as they deem fit. Now, a non-elected LG cannot be calling the shots here. India is a parliamentary democracy at the end of the day. And Supreme Court has also opinionated that Delhi is not a sub-state anymore, but a full state with its own subjects. So on those lines, if the LG, as of this point, is not kind of backing out on the whole, the whole tussle between the bureaucratic postings or the likes of it, this is clearly, a violation of the people's choice. Delhi government has been chosen by the people of Delhi, not once, not twice, but thrice, which clearly goes on to show that the people's mandate needs to be put forward. So at this point, Supreme Court's observations, which were obviously also in favor of the Aam Aadmi Party's side. The ruling was clearly done on the favor of the Aam Aadmi Party. At this point, LG needs to, and the centre government needs to understand that this is in violation of the people's rights.
Okay, Ashwani Kumar Dubey ji, you're a senior advocate at the Supreme Court. Help us understand what it means when a case is referred to a constitution bench, what really transpires from there, and if that happens, how does it move forward then?
Certain questions where the interpretation of the top court of the country is needed on the issues which require the constitutional validity, and also the issues where there is a conflict on the separation of powers. So here the issue is that whether the powers under Article 239 AA, Clause 7, Subclause A of the Constitution could be invoked to make the law of the present nature, which was not considered in either of the Constitution bench judgments of 2018, because this is not the first case which has come, the fight between the Delhi government and the center, which was in 2018 and 2023 in GNCTD versus Union of India case. Now let us understand what is 239 AA Clause 7 Subclause A says. So the Parliament can make law for giving effect to or supplementing the other provisions contained in Article 239A for all matters incidental or consequential thereto. As rightly, Shreya, you pointed out, there are three parts which does not fall within the domain of the Delhi government. And apart from that, when the questions comes for the services, those services which is to be regulated by the body elected by the government, that was the question which Supreme Court says, but the question was left over in the earlier judgment which came in May, that Parliament, subject to the law made by the Parliament. Now come to the other aspect. There are some times when some temporary law is required to be passed with the objective of accessing and gaining some power over an area and regulate it immediately. This is not first time has happened. You remember in Kashinath Jawahar's case where the Supreme Court said that to frame somebody or to arrest somebody in SC/ST case, you have to have a investigation by a competent authority. That was overruled by the Supreme Court. And that is why, due to the Parliament or the state legislature not being in session at that particular time, such legislative powers are required to be exercised as a matter of urgency by some other competent authority, such as the president or as the head of the union. So the ordinance making power is not a new feature which is added to the constitution. Earlier also, when the Government of India Act 1935 was in existence, the Article 42 and 43 of the Government of India Act gave equivalent powers to the Governor General at that point of time. So now that is in the Constitution itself. Now Supreme Court says when we have passed a judgment saying that there is an elected body except specifically mentioned in the Constitution and GNCTT Act, those powers will vest with the state governments. Whether in that situation the center can bring an ordinance to regulate the services, and that is why there is a question which the Chief Justice of India says this matter should be referred to the Constitution bench. This Constitution bench comes with an idea and judgment whether in a case where not specifically provided in the GNCTT Act, the government can bring an ordinance, because bringing an ordinance cannot be challenged by any court. That powers vested so far as the state is concerned with the government, and so far as the center is concerned is the central government. So the ordinance can be brought, but whether that ordinance will be valid in the light of the judgment passed in May or not, that is the moot question. Over to you, Shreya.
Okay. Vineet Goenka ji, is the government going to be introducing a bill in the upcoming monsoon session regarding this ordinance?
Shreya ji, Ram Ram to you, Ram Ram to my co-panelists and all the viewers who are watching me right now. It is unfortunate that we have a chief minister in Delhi who for his purpose, every now and then rushes to Supreme Court and spends hard-earned money of the taxpayer. We have seen that in the last 2 years, they have paid more than 28 crore rupees to Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who happens to be from Congress. The only purpose of this gentleman is to amass the power so that he can rule and do what he wants to do, without giving justice and without going for the governance. Now, in both the cases, whether it is DRC or in the ordinance where the rights are with the AIG, he could have discussed, he had some objection, he could have just certainly been discussed, and this would have been dealt on the table itself. But he chose to go to Supreme Court. So I would request him through your channel, he should focus on the governance here, not rush to the court. B, he should also focus on the current problem. The current problem in Delhi is floods. People are dying with floods. And we see the chief minister is absent. When the flood came, he was in Panchkula, and today he is in Bangalore. he's a non-serious politician, goes back on his words, and he does not do what he is promised.
Okay. Goenka ji, I asked you about the monsoon session. You haven't answered my question there. Is the government strategizing to bring this in the monsoon session?
And government has been ample clear. The ordinance will be brought.
Okay. I am going to come to the number game later, which is playing out. But Sanjay Hegde ji, what do you make of what the Supreme Court said today? And how do you see this panning out in the next few weeks?
Well, I happen to be in court. And I do think that much of this reportage that you are getting from second-hand sources seems to be wrong. What basically happened was that Dr. Singhvi, who was appearing for the Delhi government, they were discussing as to when the matter could be heard at length, because it came towards the end of the day's hearings. And Dr. Singhvi indicated that this matter would likely have to go to a constitution bench, because 239AA was involved, and the constitution itself provides that if there is a matter relating to an interpretation of a constitutional provision which comes up for the first time, it has to go to a constitution bench. But as and when the Dr. Singhvi also made that request, that since the constitution bench was already sitting on hearing on some matters, it could proceed to directly hear this matter as well. That question as to whether the constitution bench will hear it or when it will hear it has been kept postponed. They came to the immediate question. The immediate question was of the appointment of the DERC chairman. And the judges said that you don't need to really fight on everything. Both sides need not fight over everything. Try and sort it out by meeting each other. So that was the suggestion. There will be a detailed hearing, if possible, on Thursday. And that is when the final call will be taken as to whether a constitution bench needs to be created and when it can hear the matter.
Okay. I also want to understand from you, Sanjay ji, that, once, if, this is brought up in the monsoon session, should the judicial courts be intervening to really consider the legality which is involved in the ordinance in the parliament, or should it, hold off since it is already being brought up in the parliament at such a short notice?
See, as far as parliament is concerned, it does its own work. If an ordinance, which is emergency lawmaking, is not approved by Parliament at its next sitting, then the ordinance lapses. So there is no question that the act will have to be brought up in Parliament. Whether it will pass or whether it will not pass, that's an entirely different exercise altogether. The question is that let's assume that even an act is brought. But by an act, can you overrule a Supreme Court judgment on facts? That often is the question. You may remember that very recently, the government tried to bring in an act or amended an act to provide for a 5-year term for the Enforcement Directorate. The Supreme Court said, yes, you have the power to bring that. But when we have told you earlier that Mr. S.K. Mishra, the enforcement director, cannot be given an extension, then you cannot overrule us on facts. So what was the previous judgment? Has it been legislatively undone? Has the legislation changed the basis of the old judgment? These are all questions which the court can go into. These are two parallel processes which can act at tandem or which can wait for one another. But that is a question for the courts themselves to decide. But this kind of unseemly, what shall we say, ordinance making or ruling by decree to overrule an elected government, and also, in a sense, overruling the court, saying the courts may say whatever, but we shall decide because we've got a parliamentary majority. That is not healthy for a federal structure. This country is larger than the government of the day.
Vineetji,
There are
Vineetji, would
governments
you
which
like
come,
to
governments
respond
which go.
to that? The accusation is that you're overruling an elected government and ruling by decree.
And there are personal views of Sanjay ji does not hold ground in the political scenario here. A. B. We have seen here the chief minister has been loggerhead with all the LGs, not only the current LG, but the past LG, Mr. Jung or Mr. Baijal. Here, the chief minister also has gone to an extent of insulting and assaulting the chief secretary of the state, the bureaucracy. The chief minister has been always been using unparliamentary word for the police. So he is loggerheads with all the pillars of the democracy, whether it is administration, whether it is the house of LG, whether it is the police. So in this particular case, you don't expect much from him. He has to focus on the governance, but whereas you have seen the chief minister trying to push and shrug off all the responsibilities. When it was COVID, you would remember, he gave up and said oxygen is the responsibility of central government. When there was power shortage in this state, he said, coal has to be provided by the central government. When there was pollution, earlier they used to say Punjab and Haryana are responsible. Later on, they started saying only Haryana is responsible because Punjab is now part of Aam Aadmi Party. And today, when there were floods, they were trying to push the blame on this. There is a chief minister who pushes the blame to others, does not participate in governance, does not participate in relief giving to the people. He's busy doing two things. One, making a policy of liquor where he could amass wealth through his chief ministers. Number two, he's interested in transfer posting. These are the tools which they try to punish honest officers. We have seen by tweeting the names of the officers, they have put the officers at risk. They were into a vendetta politics where they reached midnight in the offices. They went barsack like a goon. So I think they have to maintain themselves, be reasonable. The officers serve the state. They are not part and parcel of their particular hooliganism. So here we are fighting with somebody who calls himself as to be an anarchist. Now, Honorable Sanjay ji is a good lawyer, but he may not be a right politician to ask this particular part. These are executive discussions which have to be done by elected people. And naturally, Parliament is a big house where things are done in just way. There are people who are learned and wise, and I'm sure they would discuss this in a good length when it comes to the Parliament.
Ms. Huda, what the BJP is saying is that at the end of the day, the common citizen, the Aam Aadmi, is suffering because of the tussle that's going on. There is a flood situation in Delhi. There's lots of, whether it's the DRC chairperson. I'm sorry, Vineetji, you said something?
Yeah, it's a non-performance of the chief minister. The chief minister runs away. He's absent. He's not signing a single file. It does not have a department.
Okay.
So, see, the chief minister is interested in only going to the
Hudaji would want to make a point. Yes.
To invest somebody or spend some money on the metro, he says he does not have money, but then he spends hundreds of crore rupees on advertisement. He pays crores of rupees as to be legal fees to somebody who comes from Congress. So the same money they could have used for the good of the Delhi people.
Okay.
I believe
and that shows his arrogance.
Okay. Huda Zariwala. Yes.
Shreya ji, I believe we are still yet to see a time by the BJP government when they talk on actual issues that matter to the public of Delhi and by and large the citizens of India. I mean, when was the last time we actually heard BJP speak about unemployment, price rise, the rampant level of corruption that is happening? I mean, the restless protest, there was such a delay in giving an actual statement on it. The former protest, they had to eventually withdraw that. I mean, the Central Vista project and, the lavishes and excesses that have been made while spending on the project itself, the lavish ads, I mean, the number of ads that are done by the BJP, there are actual facts and figures to prove that. I mean, the foreign trips by the Prime Minister himself, wherein 1,500 crores, has been spent just on, one particular trip. I mean, there are so many figures and facts out there that one can quote. When are we going to start talking about that? When is BJP going to actually address those issues? We have an NDA meeting, going to happen. I'm highly doubtful that the issues that they'll be discussing will actually pertain to the development of the people.
Ms. Shreya, can I intervene, please, and speak now? She has been speaking for a long now.
Okay.
The only thing BJP is concerned about
Huda, I'll
is
come back to you. Vineetji wants to respond, wants to make a point. Vineetji.
Okay. Yeah, good. Huda came out with the point of farmer agitation. I remember the day when the farmer agitation was going on, Honorable Member of Parliament Raghav Chadha from Aam Aadmi Party actually climbed a pole to put a Wi-Fi there. They provided for ambulance. They provided for food to the agitator. That is their right. But I don't see any of their MLA or any of their representative coming for the flood victims who are there. I pass through this Ganga Yamuna banks right now. Not a single Karyakarta there. I have not seen Aam Aadmi Party MLA or MPs. Where is Raghav Chadha? Where is that Wi-Fi? Where is that ambulance? Where is that food which they were trying to put to the agitation there? This is just because Mr. Zariwala took out the coat of farmer agitation. Now let me come back to you and tell you one thing. When the entire state of Delhi was suffering in COVID, Delta COVID, the chief
when was
minister
the last time
busy
BJP
discussing
spoke
liquor
about
policy.
Manipur rights?
Madam, I've never
Rights in
spoken about
Manipur.
it. Please, madam, please.
Rights
Let
in
us have a
Manipur.
decent. Let us have a decent, madam.
I'd like
Don't reflect. Madam, please let me complete. When there was peak of the COVID, the chief minister and his ministers and his hooches actually were discussing liquor policy, and now we see many of their ministers in the jail being denied bail by the government. Where is the former Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodiya? Where is Satyendra Jain? Who is Amanatullah Khan? Why was Somnath Bharti been repented? So you see that there is a party of goons who have been convicted, not only been accused. There are certain ministers who are in jail without bail. They do not have policies. They do not have intentions to do services. The only intention is to amass wealth. And the way the skeletons are coming out of the cupboard in the liquor gate, I'm sure the chief minister
I'd like to comment.
is not too far when he will be visiting Tihar.
Okay.
When
Huda wants
did
to
the
respond to that, Vineetji. Huda, please go on.
Just a very recent incident. When did the Prime Minister visit Manipur when the riots were happening and when thousands of people were being killed?
Madam,
When was
this
the last
debate is
time
about
the
Delhi.
Prime
Let us
Minister...
focus on flood victims of Delhi.
I mean,
Are you trying to
that's
compare
not what you were
that?
doing. That's not what you were
Madam,
doing
a simple
these
thing.
past few minutes, Mr. Vineet.
Don't your heart
Vineetji,
beat
that's
for
not
these
that
victims
is
because they are
what you
poor people, because they may not be having voter card? Ma'am, you can't even think.
Are the
Madam,
citizens
does
of
it
Manipur
equate?
not Indian
Does it
citizens?
equate?
Please answer that.
Does that take away
Please
the
Okay,
pain of
Vineetji,
the
I'll
flood
come back
victims
to you.
of Delhi?
Vineetji, please
Please
let her make her point. All right.
Perpetrators of crime will argue.
You know, nobody will be able to understand their point. Huda,
Those
please
who
make your
believe
point.
in taking
Vineetji, I'll
away
come back
money
to you.
in the liquor gate scamsters would ask us questions. How shameful.
I mean, thanks to all the ED and CBI raids
Okay,
that have
Those who are
been,
please go on. Yeah.
causing hell.
For the
I mean,
law
hell
and
has
order
been
situation.
broken loose on all the opposition leaders.
Madam,
I mean,
did
let
you
us not
visit a
forget
single
this is the
victim of
same
flood
government
relief here in
that
Delhi? Do you
actually
know how many people are staying on
came
road
on
right
promise.
now? Madam, did you visit? I know Karyakartas of Bharatiya
Did
Janata
you
Party have
visit
opened their
Manipur?
house so that
How many
females can
Karyakartas
go
were
and have
actually seen in
and visit
Manipur?
the toilets,
How
madam.
many
My Mahila
Karyakartas
Morcha
were
is providing
actually
sanitary
seen in
napkins and the clothes
Manipur?
for female victims of the flood here.
Mr. Vineet, how many
Ma'am,
Karyakartas? When did the Prime Minister? When did BJP leaders
your
actually
party
visit
has a
Manipur? These are as much citizens
Okay,
of
listen,
India
these
as any of us.
are.
Let me answer.
Okay,
Let me answer.
Vineetji and
Have a
Hudaji.
courage, sir. Shreya ji, let me answer.
These are okay.
Let me
These
answer,
are
Shreya ji.
other
Let me answer.
issues, and
Let me
right
answer.
now we're discussing the Delhi
answer.
Ordinance. Vineetji,
Let me answer.
this is a discussion for some other day. But right now we're talking about the. I will come back to you on some other day, Vineetji, and discuss all of these issues. But right now, Delhi Ordinance is what I want to discuss on the show.
The Chief Minister should participate in governance and not hide out.
Yes, if you want to say something about the ordinance, please go on.
Yeah.
Conferences have been done by the Prime Minister. How many press conferences did Modi ji do on any of these issues?
Let there be a civilized discussion.
Absolutely any of these issues.
Ma'am, my decibels are fine.
This is not related to the Delhi Ordinance. We're getting back to our discussion. I'm going to come to you, Ashwani ji. Help us also understand there is a concurrent list in the Indian Constitution, and that's where, the grey area is, where it says that both state and the state government can make laws. But because Delhi is such a special case, it comes under the 239 AA. Help us understand how governments maneuver through this concurrent list traditionally, and what has been happening in the case of Delhi Ordinance.
See, there are lists to entry 41 of the Constitution, Shreya, which says that the Delhi government has power over entry 41 of list 2, which is called the services. But at the same time, there is also the powers which says that the parliament too have powers to make the law. And that is why, if you see, the Supreme Court, while hearing the matter, says that whether the powers of the ordinance which has been brought by the parliament is violating the scheme of the federal democratic governance entrenched for the NCTD in Article 239AA of the Constitution, as to whether the ordinance negates the principle of federalism and primacy of the elected government. Shreya, you and other panelists would agree that the Parliament have a power to bring an ordinance. An ordinance making power of the executive is a legislative power and not an executive action or administrative decision. And therefore, if you see the court's judgment, which was passed in 2018, Government of NCT of Delhi versus Government of India, which says that Parliament also has powers over matters in list 2 in relation to the NCTD in addition to the Delhi Assembly. If the Parliament exercises such a power to make a law in matters in list 2, the union executive power will also extend to those matters. Until and unless Parliament makes such laws and matters relating to list 2, the executive power of the union, and consequently the LG will be confined to the specified 3 entries of list 2, public order, police and land. And that is what the Supreme Court, in earlier judgment passed in May, said that in para 95 have categorically mentioned this fact. But the Shreya question here is, we cannot negate the ordinance making power of the government for the appointment of the ED director. Because both are the different, appointing somebody on the executive domain and making a law, bringing an ordinance, which has been said specifically in the parliament that the center or the states have power to bring the ordinance in certain circumstances. But here only page is, what do I say, that the Supreme Court's 2023 May judgment, which says that the state government, Delhi government under the GNCTD Act, except 3 parts have powers for the services. Now, if we see the Supreme Court's various precedents, like A.K. Roy versus Union of India, where Supreme Court says that legislative power is subject only to the limitation prescribed under the Constitution and no other. And if any law is passed by the legislator which is not competent to be so passed and which is violative of Part 3 of the Constitution, it is ineffective. But that is what that test, why Supreme Court says that whether the judgment of the Supreme Court and at that point of time breaking an ordinance, there will be any issue which is to be dealt by the parliament, when we have already specifically said that the elected government has powers to bring the services, has power to make the law, and has power to regulate the entries which has been specifically. That is what the matter before the Supreme Court. So let's see what the Supreme Court decide. But so far as the ordinance making power is concerned, that vests with the parliament and also the government. So specifically comparing with the ED appointment, I don't think that finds any place here or hold any fit. That's all. Over to you, Shreya.
Vineetji, is it morally correct? Is it morally correct for the center to be, having a problem with this kind of an arrangement with, what they have been saying? Because the elected government has certain powers in Delhi, and that's what the court said earlier.
Good question, Shreya.
I missed part of the question. There was a drop in my audio. But ultimately, it still comes down to this.
The question is for me.
The center believes that because we are the center,
the question is for me.
We can do everything. We have the power of ordinance making. And
Sanjay, yes, I'll come back to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was the question to somebody else?
Yeah, Sanjay, the question is for me.
The question, the question was for Vineetji. Vineetji, please respond. Sanjay, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, morally, legally, ethically, all the 3 counts, the center government is doing right and just, not because I'm coming from Bharatiya Janata Party, but looking at the circumstances and the intentions of the state government. Yes, the court are wise. They would always guide us on what they view. But at the same time, ultimately in a parliament, elected representatives are supreme. They would discuss, they are the voice of the people. And I'm sure to understand that in this particular case, what the government in center has done is right and it is just.
Sanjay, now coming back to you, please make the point you were making.
My point is simple. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Unless you respect each and every state and don't claim overlordship, then you do not really have a union. You basically have a center which controls everything. The center thinks that it is the successor in title to the old British system, where the governor was everything and the local government didn't count for anything. It was in that time that when you had this kind of dual control under the Government of India Act, that the Congress governments then resigned, and it was the central British government which dragged India to World War II. That had its own consequences. The point that the Supreme Court has made over two constitution bench judgments is that if there is an elected government, there is no way of denying it powers, and there is no way of rendering it ineffective through central legislation. Because Delhi has the central government in it, that does not mean that over 2 crore people in Delhi should be denied representative democracy. There are 3 subjects which are reserved for the center through which the LG operates. Now you want to add a 4th subject, you want to add a 5th subject, you want to basically take over, hollow out the Delhi government, leave it there as useless as Christmas ornament on a Christmas tree, or just keep a government for ornamental value, then that is not what the courts will buy. There have been various legislative interventions and interventions of the center. The court has struck them down twice. Let us see what happens the 3rd time.
Okay, Sanjay ji, I also want to talk about the number game, which is the most crucial part here.
Shreya ji,
Congress has given out its support to the Aam Aadmi Party on this Delhi Ordinance. Yes, Vineet ji, you want to respond?
See, Sanjay ji is a fantastic legal illuminary. I'm sure he understands law very nicely. But his experience in politics and understanding about parliamentary procedures may not be that good as his admirer. This is my personal opinion. And the second time, somebody told me that if a wise person, an intelligent person, starts taking side of somebody else just because he dislikes you, then that is the end of wisdom of the state. Sanjay ji is a wise person. Just because he dislikes us, he tries to give justification to everything and anything which has been done wrong by Arvind Kejriwal. It will be the end of a good discussion. So my personal request to him would be, sir, you are intelligent. Do not get into defending Arvind Kejriwal ji for all his wrongs just because you dislike us. You may have disagreements with us. You're a nice person. But please, in the interest of the citizens, in the interest of the democracy, you should speak which is truth, correct, and which is need of the hour. This is my personal request to you, sir.
Okay.
I refuse to get personal.
Okay, Huda,
all this was just personal, and I refuse to get personal. It is said that
Huda, coming
good
to you.
minds discuss issues,
yes.
Mediocre minds discuss personalities.
I leave it to you, sir. I leave it to you.
All right, Huda.
Person.
Yes. With you, Shreya.
Okay, Huda, recently the Congress extended its support to the Aam Aadmi Party on this ordinance, but it seems like more of an optic than actual concrete political gain, because we know the numbers, in terms of numbers, the BJP is still standing solid when it comes to the numbers in the Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. Of course, it has the numbers, but more of an optics, more of a photo op than actual political gains.
We've heard the Congress General Secretary in charge, Mr. Vineet Goenka, who said that the party is consistently opposing any attempts of the union government to sabotage federalism. Congress has seen, what has happened to, how the center was behind Rahul Gandhi, when he had given a statement back in the UK and the likes of it. Even Congress understands that, a united opposition is the only solution at this point in time. They are also consistently opposing the attitude of the central government to run the opposition state via governors, be it be the current LG, be it be the previous LGs. I mean, their stand is also as clear as the Aam Aadmi Party's, as any opposition who is united at this point in time, which is supporting the ordinance of the Delhi Ordinance. I mean, at this point, all the opposition parties understand that the likes of the ED and CBI, which clearly run, with the whims and fancies of the central government, this needs to obviously, stop. We are a parliamentary democracy at the end of the day. Delhi is, a parliamentary democracy as well, elected by 2 crore plus citizens. Let us not forget that the interference of the LG is not a matter of today or yesterday. This has been ongoing since the inception of Aam Aadmi Party's government in Delhi. So at this point, the Supreme Court intervention is also not stopping the central government to to try and run Delhi, like they want to. I mean, this is something, the united opposition is something which clearly the NDA is going to be worried about. So no, this is not just about optics. This is, a message, a clear-cut message from the elected parliamentarians and the people, voicing the people's rights and their opinions, which clearly do matter, at least to the Aam Aadmi Party, definitely to the Congress and the likes of all the opposition that is coming united under one flag to stand up against the anarchy, which the BJP has become at this point. Over to you, Shreya.
Okay, Vineet ji, in terms of numbers, you've got 21 members of the NDA still not having said anything about their support or being against the ordinance. Do you expect at least the BJD and the YSRCP to stand by you?
See, our job is to give governance to the people, and people in Delhi specific also. And we will go to the parliament and we'll see the number games there. But I would like to respond to what Ms. Zariwala spoke about. They went to Congress, they're trying to convince the Congress, and good, Congress has supported them in this particular part. But let me expose them on your show. This is the same party, this is the chief minister, who had put posters about Sheila Dikshit. They called names to Congress, they called names to the leaders of Congress, they called names to Laluji and others. And today they are sitting in front of them, begging them support. And that too in an ordinance which is just and which is for the governance of Delhi. That exposes 12 standards of Arvind Kejriwal, who is not interested to give any relief to the flood victims who are there right now in Delhi. He has not visited them, neither the Congress has visited them. But at the same time, they are enjoying the weather in Bangalore, also the hospitality of the state government there. So my request to him through your channel is, people in Delhi are suffering right now. They are staying on the banks of Yamuna. They are without food. And tomorrow, once the water recedes, there will be conditions of health which have to be dealt with. And at the same time, he is famous in doing something which is called a shrugging of the responsibility. That time he's going to say the center will look after the people who are ill. So my request to him once again is, while you do all your politics, please take care of the people of Delhi. We should actually be in Delhi right now, supervising the relief work.
All right. We'll leave it there. All I can say is, of course, that amid all of this, the common citizen is suffering, and that's what all governments should be focusing on, whether it's the center or the state. Mr. Vineet Goenka, Mr. Ashwani K Dubey, Ms. Huda Zariwala, and Mr. Sanjay Hegde, thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective on the Delhi Ordinance. We're heading for a short break on Beyond the Headline. News and updates continue on the other side. Stay tuned.